Hello and welcome. Today we're diving deep into a topic that is fundamentally about our shared future, the 30th Conference of the Parties, or as the world knows it, COP30, hosted in Belém, Brazil. Now you hear COP all the time, but what is it really? In simple terms, think of the COP as the main decision-making body for climate change. It's part of a larger structure called the UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. This convention was born back in 1992 at the Rio Earth Summit. The core idea then and now is common but differentiated responsibilities. It's a bit of a mouthful, but the concept is straightforward. While every nation has a role to play, the developed nations, those who historically contributed the most to emissions, must lead the charge. They are expected to take deeper cuts in their own emissions, and crucially, provide the financing and technology developing countries need to both fight climate change and adapt to its impacts. This regime rests on 5 key pillars: mitigation, which just means reducing emissions; adaptation, which is about preparing for the climate impacts we can no longer avoid; financing, technology, and capacity building. Over the years, this framework has given us 2 landmark agreements. First, there was the Kyoto Protocol in 1997. Its main feature was setting mandatory quantitative emission reduction targets, but only for developed countries. It also introduced market mechanisms like the Clean Development Mechanism, or CDM. But the climate challenge evolved, and it became clear that this approach wasn't enough. So in 2015, we got the Paris Agreement at COP21. This was a seismic shift. The Paris Agreement obligates all countries, both developed and developing, to take action. How? Through nationally determined contributions, or NDCs. Essentially, each country puts forward its own plan, its own NDC, explaining what actions it will take to help meet the agreement's main goals, keeping the global temperature rise well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, while pushing hard to limit it to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The Paris Agreement also established a reinforced transparency regime to track everyone's progress. So why the urgency? This is where the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, comes in. The IPCC doesn't do its own research. Instead, it provides regular scientific assessments. It tells us what the global scientific community knows about climate change, and the science is unequivocal. We are perilously close to irreversible tipping points. The 1.5 degrees Celsius target isn't just a nice to have, it's a lifeline. This brings us to COP30, happening right now in November 2025 in Belém. Why is this location so significant? Because it's in the heart of the Amazon. It's a powerful symbolic and political statement, placing the world's largest tropical rainforest at the center of the debate. The negotiations in Belém are clustering around 3 massive interconnected themes. First, the energy transition. This is the big one. We have to move away from fossil fuels, oil, gas, and coal. The agreement at COP28 in Dubai mentioned transitioning away from them, which was historic, but it was just words. COP30 is where the rubber meets the road. Brazil, as the host, is pushing for a roadmap, a concrete plan. This plan needs to define the steps, the timelines, and the responsibilities for each country to replace fossil fuels with renewables and improve energy efficiency. The key phrase you'll hear is just, orderly, and equitable. This means we can't just flip a switch. We must ensure that the transition doesn't leave workers and developing economies behind. Second, climate adaptation. For many nations, the climate has already changed. They are facing floods, droughts, and rising seas right now. The Global Goal on Adaptation, GGA, is a major discussion point. The idea is to create an instrument that actually measures how well countries are preparing for these impacts. It's a way to assess who is successfully adapting and, more importantly, who is being left behind. And third, the most contentious topic of all, financing. This is the central bottleneck. Developing countries are justifiably arriving in Belém with a clear message. You cannot separate the climate crisis from the global economy. For years, developed nations have fallen short of their promise to mobilize $100 billion a year in climate finance. Now, the needs are far greater. The Baku to Belém roadmap is the plan being discussed to mobilize a staggering $1.3 trillion per year by 2035. But the quality of this finance matters. Developing nations don't want more high-interest loans that push them deeper into debt. They are demanding more grants, donations, and low-interest long-term loans. Without financing on this scale, all the talk about mitigation and adaptation is just not viable. Now let's look at the host. What is Brazil's strategy? The Lula administration wants to position Brazil as a global protagonist in the green agenda, acting as a bridge between the global north developed nations and the global south developing nations. Brazil has brought two major proposals to the table. The first is the Belém 4X commitment, co-sponsored with Italy and Japan. The goal is ambitious: quadruple the global use of sustainable fuels by 2035. This includes green hydrogen, biofuels, and biogases. The Brazilian government argues that electrification alone isn't enough to decarbonize heavy industry and transportation. The second and perhaps more innovative proposal is the Tropical Forests Forever Fund, or TFFF. This is a fascinating financial mechanism. Let's break it down simply. This is not a donation fund. Instead, it's a fixed income investment model. The idea is that countries and private entities invest in the fund, and the profits from those investments are then used to pay countries like Brazil, Indonesia, and the Congo for keeping their forests standing. It's a way to create a permanent, predictable revenue stream for conservation, rewarding countries for the service their forests provide to the planet. However, Brazil faces its own coherence dilemma. Just days before hosting this massive climate conference, the government has been criticized for licensing new oil exploration blocks along the equatorial margin. This has naturally led to charges of hypocrisy. How can a country lead the charge on decarbonization while simultaneously searching for new oil? The government's defense is that this is part of a just transition, that the revenue from this oil is needed to fund the transition to renewables. But for civil society organizations, this narrative is dangerous. It risks delaying the urgent phase-out of fossil fuels that the science demands. So what does success at COP30 look like? First, we need to see a new ambitious cycle of NDCs. The current NDCs on the table are nowhere near enough. They only cover about 30% of global emissions and would lead to a 4% reduction by 2035. The science says we need a 60% cut. This is the ambition gap that Belém must close. Second, we need that roadmap for the energy transition to be more than just a political declaration. It needs to have teeth, clear targets, timelines, and verifiable mechanisms. And finally, it all comes back to finance. A concrete agreement on the $1.3 trillion Baku to Belém roadmap and real capitalization of the TFFF will be the ultimate tests of success. As the Brazilian minister stated, you cannot talk about implementation without the means of implementation. COP30 in the heart of the Amazon is where the world must finally provide those means. Thank you for listening.